Hey everyone, what up? Mad Kaiser here, and welcome to part 3 of this marathon I'm partaking in, called Road to Visions of Mana, where I'll be playing and reviewing the past mainline Mana games in preparation for Visions of Mana. And we start off with, of course, the Final Fantasy Adventure, Secret of Mana OG, Trials of Mana OG, and then we end off with the Trials of Mana Remake. What the hell is the Dawn of Mana? I never heard of it. And at the time of this review, Visions of Mana is already out, and I'm already taking my time with it. And as stated before, I really want to focus on these two games before we get to Visions of Mana. So let's continue on. And we start with an interesting development story for this game. So production of what will be dubbed as Seiken Densetsu 3, or what will initially be called Secret of Mana 2, began around in 1993, which was the same year that Secret of Mana 1 came out. And this began with a very lengthy period of trial and error, where they had lots of several prototype designs, but then they were ultimately scrapped in the long run. Especially when you had the approach of the next generation of consoles, which would be the PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn at that time. So, unable to keep the prolonged production of Trials of Mana was met with so many difficulties, as long as also the fact that they also had trouble with getting some staff, as many of them were brought in other projects like say Chrono Trigger and Romance in Saga 3. Especially one programmer in demand was Hironobu Sakaguchi himself, where even Hiromichi Tanaka remembered that he had to fight for to get him. Originally, this game wasn't meant to be like a continuation of Secret of Mana, but then ultimately that team had to scrap all that around and make a brand new full-on action game from scratch really. And they also wanted to get close to the 3D graphics, especially for the Super Famicom, so they created multiple graphical layers, even providing some cut content from Secret of Mana, which mainly involves new monster designs really. The final product for this game would be very large, and the team were really pushing the Super Famicom to its capacity, to a point that even a part which involves a volcano dungeon with a very tough end boss was ultimately cut for Trials of Mana. And then we also get to the other interesting thing about it, and that was the localization, albeit lack of localization. Now, there's a lot of interesting factors, and it really depends on who you believe. Retro Gamer, for example, stated that in 2011, localizing the game for North America or Europe would have cost a lot of money, especially with the rise of the competing consoles, which again was the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. And that would diminish the benefits of spending a lot of time and money for a Super Famicom game. Another people would also point into is that the Secret of Mana sales might have been lackluster overseas. Though another issue that comes from the lead programmer of Secret of Evermore, Brian Federer, stated that Seiken Densetsu 3 had some software bugs, and this would hinder its likelihood of being, well, eligible for release for Nintendo outside of Japan itself. Then later in 2020, the series producer known as Masaru Oyamada did reveal that the size for the game meant that there was no spare capacity for the cartridge to have localization. Not to mention at that time Squaresoft was about to move to the PS1 generation. Again, all of this is crazy and all over the place, but regardless, Trials of Mana was released for Japan in September 30th, 1995 for the Super Famicom, and then around the 2000s we did get a fan translation, though things really changed that in 2019, when a collection of Mana for Switch came, we got not only, well, Final Fantasy Adventure as well as Secret of Mana, but we also got Trials of Mana, officially here in the West with a full-on translation, which makes this the very first time that Seiken Densetsu 3 has officially came to the West. Not only that, but even better, we also had a full-on 3D remake in 2020 being made by Zine, and this would feature things like nice visuals, updated improved combat, with signs of it being a little bit more modern in a sense, but still retaining that classic feel, as well as also introducing voice acting, for better or worse. But still, it would still retain what made the Mana series, especially Trials of Mana, and this will be on the PlayStation 4, Switch, and PC. However, as much as I really love to review the Trials of Mana remake, I of course want to conclude this whole collection of Mana thing by reviewing the original game, which I'll be doing of course. But before we begin, if you like what you've seen here, then by all means, like the video, click the subscribe button if you're new, and hit that notification icon if you want more Mana content from yours truly. Not only that, but I'm in the middle of playing Persona 5 Royal, and hopefully before this year ends, I'll be able to do my long-awaited 750 subscriber special of Persona 5 Royal. So please look forward to that as you can. With that said, let's get back to the video. And with all that said, let's jump on a cannon, ride on a turtle, and fall into a hole as we head straight into Trials of Mana. So with Trials of Mana, instead of one story, there are actually multiple stories, from 6 protagonists no less, and each of them contrasts to 3 general stories that overlap depending on the pair. For example, both Angela and Duran, while having their own separate motives and backgrounds, they do eventually overlap by having similar villains and connections. The same can be said for Hawkeye and Reese, and Kevin and Charlotte. And you're able to select one as your main story, with 2 being your companions. And if you do get one that has a different story, you get a glance of what that story is in particular. Now, I'm not going to go through each of what their stories are. Instead, I'll provide a synopsis of what I played throughout this game, which is Kevin, Charlotte, and Hawkeye. So, Kevin, no, not that Kevin, unless it's tied to why he was absent in Trails for so long, is a beastman hailing from Ferolia, which is a subspecies of humans with beast-like features with claws and teeth, and have lots of hair, and incredible strength that when it becomes night, they turn into werewolves.
Would this make me a furry if I said smash?
He currently hangs out with his best friend Carl in the Dusk Moon Forest. However, something goes a little strange. Carl, weirdly enough, goes very feral to the point that Kevin has to fight back. And on that same night, his people, the Beast Kingdom, are preparing to invade the rest of the world for the Mana Stones, with a mysterious masked jester aiding them. Kevin is also stumbled upon Fairy, who comes from the Sanctuary of Mana, where the Mana Tree is slowly dying, with Mana being slowly disappearing from this realm in general, and that the Mana Stones themselves imprison beings known as the Benevolons, giant calamity beasts of destruction that could be released. Among that, here also comes Charlotte, the granddaughter of the priest Wendell, a little cleric who had a run-in with Heath, her friend, till he was captured by a similar masked jester. And, okay, I can't really do it anymore, oh my god. Well, she comes along for the ride, and she also teams up with Hawkeye, a thief from Navarre, who set out to free his friend Jessica, who's been held captive by an evil woman named Belladonna. And all of these link up to collect all the elementals, opening up the Mana Sanctuary, and restoring the Mana Sword to defeat the forces of evil, and save the world. And that is the story, and well, from what I played, it's pretty solid. And I know this is gonna sound repetitive, but while it's not a masterpiece or groundbreaking in a sense, as it does share a similar formula to other titles, I still think it's a pretty good way for the game to progress and show why things are happening. Though it does also have some really good layers within them that makes it pretty neat. One of which is the characters and their routes and their general motives, and how each of them align with each other. while not feeling too samey in that aspect, despite the fact that some of them do share a similar villain. With Kevin and Charlotte, they share with the same villain known as Gourmand and a masked mage, with the latter also being tied to one of those forces. And depending on who you pick, you do get some different outcomes from different villains, with some of them going to war with each other, and some of them even admitting defeat, regardless from the villains of your preferred route, which is pretty cool. Another aspect that the Mana games tend to have is solid lore and world building, with aspects of the Milestones and the Benevodons, and how other species operate differently towards others, making this fantasy world feel more alive in a sense. And lastly, what works really is the characters themselves, the main ones being pretty likable all around. Kevin himself is pretty enjoyable, with him being kind and more of a pacifist than his noble beastmen, though he can still be a bit of a goofball. Then we have Charlotte, and despite the way she talks, and don't worry, I'll talk about her when we get to the remake. Oh god, I'll talk about her when we get there.
I'm Charlotte. I'm a famous beauty from Wendell.
Anyway, she's kinda funny, and she's sort of like the comic relief that Poppy was in Secret of Mana, though kinda has a rough history. And the same can be said with Hawkeye, who, while is a bit of a wisecracking guy, he's also concerning for his friends, and the way you do also get to run with other protagonists in this game is pretty cool. The cast in general is pretty good, and the same can be said for both the NPCs and the antagonists themselves. Being similar to the villains of Secret of Mana, but somehow I feel a little bit more better, as they have more of a direct presence opposed to each other, and they do act as your foils for the party, and some of them have a personal connection to the protagonist. Like again, Gourmand himself being tied to Kevin and Charlotte, and while they're just evil for the sake of being evil, with a little bit of tragedy in the mix, they are just still general enjoyable foils for the party. So yeah, again, while it is a simple basic story, the adventure itself really makes this whole journey worthwhile. When it comes to the visuals, especially for a Super Famicom title, this game looks absolutely gorgeous. Where Secret of Mana would excel with a beautiful color palette, Trials of Mana excels really well with having just incredible detail, while all the environments, characters, locations, everything else just looks well detailed and just graphically pleasing. A lot of these games, including of course Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, Star Ocean, and Tales of Fantasia, and heck even Super Mario RPG, just look absolutely amazing, and those games alone push the Super Famicom to its absolute limit, with Trials of Mana being no exception. As a result, Trials of Mana stands as one of the best looking games from the Super Famicom, and makes sense because this is the last Mana game for that system alone. The spell and attack animations look awesome as ever, and the characters look really great. There's really no complaints about it, and heck, even the remake of Trials of Mana looks absolutely amazing, and incredibly faithful to what the original game was standing for. So yeah, absolutely stunning. And we finally approach to the gameplay. So Trials of Mana, like the two games before it, is a real-time action RPG. However, the gameplay is a little more different. Instead of having like say a stamina bar that ties into your attacks, Trials removes that completely, and you're able to attack with a small combo, which honestly feels much more smoother and nicer to play all around. But you also have this bar right here, where if you keep hitting enemies, that bar will grow, and once it's completely full, you are able to unleash a powerful heavy attack, which also serves as your class strike, and that alone can deal lots of damage towards enemies and bosses. The ring menu also comes back, and honestly, it's a lot more smoother to navigate compared to Secret of Mana. Not only that, but also the same can be said for magic. albeit depending on who you play as it's not entirely emphasized as it was in Secret of Mana, but when it's there, it's really nice. Character switching also makes a comeback, but this time you have a very cool new mechanic, where if your party member is either dead, or like frozen or turned into stone, you are able to immediately switch to the next available party member, which honestly, it's a very nice quality of life feature. And when you do level up, similar to say Final Fantasy Adventure, you have the option to improve either your stats, whether it's intelligence, power, dexterity, or even defense. And honestly, it's a cool new thing. Sadly, however, the whole weapon levels and the magic levels you get in Secret of Mana are completely absent. Though, what you do get in exchange, honestly, it's really damn awesome. And that, my friends, drumroll please. The class system. Yep, introducing to the Mana series, we have job classes, where once you have enough levels for your base classes, you're able to approach any milestone available, and once you do that, you have the option to switch between either a light class or a dark class. Though sadly, if you do pick one, you can't pick the other. Picking said job class will improve your character stats as well as making your attacks more stronger, gives an additional bar with a class strike, as well as having more varied abilities, some of which can be even unlocked by leveling up, like Hawkeye here being a ranger, which him having some abilities that can either throw spikes or use sleep flower to track down enemies, or Shard for example being an enchantress, where she can gain more upgraded healing spells. And once you have a lot of levels for your second class, as well as a special item, you are able to upgrade into a more powerful class, which has the same benefits as your other class,
but better.
Outside of that, the cannon travel also makes a nice comeback, and the dungeons themselves are pretty cool, with some form of puzzles here and there, like the one here where you get to have to find the right flower in order to progress. And if you don't, well, that's not really good.
You'll get lost!
And this one here in Ghost Hole, where wind will blow you into a different direction. Even if, not gonna lie, some dungeons do drag a little bit at times. Killing enemies also give you some treasure, though sometimes you get a bonus effect that's sort of like a roulette wheel. It can land on things like either being safe or hit with spikes, even when you get said item. Another new mechanic is also the seed box, where you're able to plant seeds and you are able to obtain items, some of which range from common to gold to silver and to a mystery symbol, where you get really special items. Another new addition is the day and night system, where it becomes day and night over time, and depending on the time and day, the residential elemental magic becomes a lot more stronger. Like for example, if it's Lumina day or Lumina night, the magic from Lumina's light magic becomes a lot more stronger. Or if it's shaded day or shaded night, Shade's dark magic becomes a lot more stronger. And also more, since Kevin is a beast man, when it becomes nighttime, Kevin transforms into his werewolf form and becomes a lot more stronger. Another new thing for this game will have to be the Vuskav, this giant turtle that acts as your boat, and basically for underwater sections, which honestly is a nice addition, alongside the return of the Flammy, who acts the same. But the only difference here is that the world map has actual names of the locations and tells you what your current goal is, which, thank you! Oh god! Honestly, that's another gripe I had with Secret of Mana. The bosses in also this game are absolutely amazing, all of them being very tough to deal with. Wait a minute. What do you mean I didn't talk about the bosses in Secret of Mana? Oh, okay, fine. Well, the bosses in Secret of Mana were fine, okay? They were fine. Some were even good. Until, of course, you can only cheese them with using Poppy's magic to the point that they no longer become a challenge, except a few that can use reflect magic. But yeah, you happy now? You happy that I corrected a mistake? Jeez. Now, putting aside from that tangent, the combat in Trials of Mana is really, really good, and it's almost akin to say an arcade beat 'em up. And out of the collection of Mana, this has easily my favorite gameplay in the entire series, no question about it. That being said, it does have a few problems. Outside of backtracking, some dungeons, as I mentioned, do drag a little long for my taste. Another major issue, and this one is a notorious aspect of Mana, would have to be the ability spell pausing, and it's really, really notorious, as both you and enemies and bosses can really spam the heck out of spells and abilities, especially the bosses, including the later ones where they can spam not once, not twice, maybe even 3 times abilities and spells, and this really drags the fight into a crawl and becomes really, really annoying. But yeah, that's really it. Honestly, I'm surprised that's the only main issues I have with the gameplay of Trials of Mana. There might be some other more that I could list down, but those are very tiny nitpicks. Overall, yeah, the combat in Trials of Mana, especially for a game like this, is really, really amazing. When it comes to music, man, is it as great as it was with Secret of Mana, with Hiroki Kikuta stepping back again to compose, and he did a terrific job, with lots of very catchy tracks that makes you want to dance to it, as well as just some emotional soft music and some truly epic boss themes here and there. With that said, let's do a showcase, shall we? With that said, how is this game, now that it's finally here in the West? Well, simply put, I really liked Trials of Mana a lot, to the point that I actually kinda love it. It easily has the best combat compared to the other two, and easily is the most streamlined in terms of design. Not only that, but the music is amazing as always, the graphics themselves look absolutely beautiful, and I even enjoyed the characters a lot more, thanks to the new story approach. Sure, it does have some flaws here and there, but only a few that would hinder what otherwise would be a truly great time overall. And I even like this more than Secret of Mana, and it's a shame that it took this long to be outside of Japan, as I think it would even have a stronger lasting impression and legacy over Secret of Mana, and I truly think that this game is where the Mana series initially peaked, before a certain other game, but we'll get there soon. Alas, I'll give Trials of Mana 4 Vuskavs out of 5. And here we are, we finished the collection of Mana, and while I'm currently playing Visions of Mana at the moment, there's at least one game to finish for this review marathon. So coming up next, we will return to the world of Trials of Mana, but in a new light. Until then, let me know down in the comments if you guys played this game and what you think about it. With that said, Mad Kaiser, out.